All right, we're going to kick it off and rock and roll. It is Tuesday, March 25th. I'm Cynthia Kao, the Executive Director of Operation Code. For those of you who don't know me, I'm an Air Force veteran. I was a 15-year active duty military spouse, and I have a son who's a service disabled veteran as well. So today we're going to be talking about Openmind Health, who's a guest speaker with Operation Code today, and they'll talk a little bit about how they're insured through the Veterans Affairs and also with Tricare as a third-party provider. We all know that the Veterans Health Administration and Veterans Affairs Services has delays and wait lists for behavioral health services, and a lot of the services are getting cut. So we want to be able to be proactive and get folks the services you need, and then also talk about maybe reducing some of the barrier to mental health access, right? And how that affects us in the tech community with like ongoing work stress. Maybe it's like people are facing burnout. So I'll just introduce a little bit about my background. So before I worked in tech, I'm a self-taught developer and designer, software designer. But before that, I spent 15 years as a licensed clinical social worker, and I specialized in trauma and addiction. And so during my time as a reservist and as an active duty spouse, I was working with 3 different hospitals. I also worked with the different county school boards where we were stationed. And it was really rewarding work to me. The thing that I did not prepare myself for was the military stress. So not only was I dealing with a lot of stress at work, I was dealing with a lot of stress at home. And then this was during, the 2000s when we had the high, what we call the surge, right, in Iraq. We had a high tempo deployment rate. I don't think we even had like a year in between deployments at that point. It was like you come home, you have like maybe 5 or 6 months, and then you're deployed again. And those deployments were like the first one I remember was 18 months long. So it was a pretty long deployment tempo. And then that causes a lot of stress for the family members. It causes a lot of stress for your service members when you're constantly kind of on the go. Like you're about to head back, even for mid-tour leave. They give you like a week or two of mid-tour leave. But in your mind, you're not really like present, spending time with your family because you're getting ready to go back and your mind is ready to go. And you're kind of in this self-protective bubble. Well, I got burnt out from doing clinical work and I made the transition into tech. And I still love what I do. And it's kind of come full circle now that I run a nonprofit. But it's even more imperative right now as we're seeing, national stress, right? The tempo of like, do veterans care? We've got like people still deploying to do peacekeeping duties. We have people still overseas. You have folks that are reserves, National Guard that are still forward deployed or might be activated, and they're still trying to keep their tech jobs. That may, where we're hearing from folks in the industry where they're facing layoffs, whether you're a government federal worker or government contractor, there's some major reductions in forces going on. And so what better way to get folks like, let's decrease the stigma and talk about this because it's not new in our community when we're facing like additional prolonged combat stress. You might be facing prolonged unemployment, family issues. I'm a sandwich generation, so I've got elderly parents that I'm a caregiver for, and I've got children. And so all of that kind of like it gets to you. And so I want to talk a little bit about from my journey as a service member, going through multiple deployments, raising kids on my own, managing my spouse's deployments, it was not easy. And one of the hardest things when I got out of the service was realizing that I was really isolated. Like I had my job and I was really good at what I did, but socially I was very isolated. And it really took like I had this older Vietnam Marine who I met in a writing group, and he actually said to me like, have you ever gone through the diagnostic process for PTSD? And do you have a therapist? And I was like, I don't know what you're trying to say. Like, what are you trying to tell me? Because I think I'm perfectly fine, you know? And in that situation, like you've lived with symptoms for so long that it may seem this is your everyday normal. This is what you're used to. But I'm glad he it was very straightforward with me. I was a little offended when he said that to me. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm a clinical therapist. Like, I'm trained in this stuff. Don't you think I would know if I needed help? But because he did it in such a gentle way and he did it really with the love of like a family member, and he said, you need to go get tested. Like, you need to go get screened because you're not getting out of the house. You're having nightmares. You're not sleeping. You're very avoidant. I had all the classic symptoms. And yet I couldn't even recognize it in myself. So here's somebody who like worked in the field, who still had trouble kind of, asking for help. And so for me to be able to finally get diagnosed, like I went through the VA and it took me a while and I finally got connected with a therapist. And even then it was like maybe once a month. And so I wasn't having like the sessions as close together as I needed. And so I really want to like take that story and tell you guys that like, look, my life where I am right now from 10 years ago or 11, 12 years ago is a complete 180. And I'm so glad I was able to go and get the services I needed and ended up getting a third party provider and, regular. I go and see a therapist regularly. I look at it like, look, if you're going to go for your yearly physical, it's just like going for your yearly physical. It's just like going to the dentist. Mental health is health. It's health. So like take care of yourself, make sure you ask for help frequently, make sure you get it early. Don't wait until you're in a position where a crisis happens or you're carrying way too many things and you feel like you can't juggle them. And that is totally okay. So I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Craig Beach and one of his colleagues, David Teachout. Go ahead, Dr. Beach, tell us a little bit about where you're from, your journey, and how you started Openmind.
Great. Thanks so much, Cynthia, for that introduction and for this opportunity. And thanks, Christelle, for being here to help moderate. I'll introduce David in a moment. I want to start by thanking everyone on this call for their service. And also, that's very helpful, Cynthia, to get that background is because that will relate very much what you shared to what we're here to talk about and support, which is normalizing and prioritizing mental health as a critical part of overall health.
Mhm.
So I have a couple slides. Can everyone see the slides?
Yep.
You can. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Openmind Health specifically, and then I really want to focus our time on our customized support and treatment for active duty and veterans. So Openmind Health, our mission is to advance the mind, body, spirit health of our diverse clients so they can become their best selves. So a couple of key points there. Mind, body, spirit health really gets at one of our differentiators, which is holistic care, and then diverse clients, which we'll be speaking about more. But that includes people from places where they've traditionally not been able to easily access care or care that's culturally affirming. In terms of our leadership, I'm the founder of Openmind Health, the CEO, and a psychiatrist. I've been working in the field for 25 years. Stephanie Robinson, who's not here today and sends her regrets. She's a psychotherapist and the chief clinical officer. And then David Teachout, who is a psychotherapist and an expert on all things active duty veteran mental health. So between us, we probably have about 60 years of combined experience, and we all share a commitment and passion for holistic care and serving the active duty and veteran community. And that's very much the reason I started Openmind Health in 2021. Before that, I was living and working in San Diego. I've practiced as a forensic psychiatrist for a long time, worked in different settings ranging from county hospitals and clinics, academic psychiatry, correctional facilities, private practice, and very much created Openmind Health at the beginning of the pandemic. It's a 100% virtual company, really with a goal to offer something more holistic and to get to the root causes of emotional conditions, which we'll talk more about. So 3 of the foundational principles, or what we call the OMH way, are quality over quantity. And And for those who work with us or are treated by us, it's something we take very seriously and are proud of. Our sessions are individual. We typically do video sessions, very much like we're seeing each other here. And our sessions tend to, for the most part, be 60 minutes. And why that's important is so that you can do that deeper emotional processing that helps people to get better sooner, as opposed to frequent ways that a lot of people communicate, like text or email. So we'll do that kind of communication if it's like, when is my appointment? Or is it correct that the dose of the medication should be this? But the actual therapy and our belief in how you process your emotions is deeper if it's synchronous in kind of like a video setting like we're having here today. We also have multilingual providers. We very much believe that one size does not fit all, and Open Mind Health is not cookie cutter. We don't have recipes. We don't use a structured formula to do our care. Everything is customized based on kind of you and what your needs and priorities are. And as I mentioned, we do that in a culturally affirming way with both diverse clients as well as diverse therapists. And then holistic is really getting at our recognition of the importance of the mind, body, spirit connection, comprehensive approaches, and then complementary approaches. So people have probably heard of talk therapy in the mental health field and medications or prescribing, but we also do what we call alternative and complementary approaches. There are many of them, but they include things like breath work, Tai Chi, music therapy, art therapy, etc. In terms of culturally affirming care, so this is far more than just getting access to a provider. For example, if you live in a rural area and there isn't many people available, this is really about the fit between you and the provider. And culturally affirming care is really ensuring that your treatment and care plan considers your unique experiences, your cultural identity, your gender, and your personal history, including, for the purposes of this talk, your experience in active duty or as a veteran, which is very unique to you. And that's why we created a customized treatment approach and a wellness track specifically for active duty and veterans. So one of the things we try to do at Open Mind Health is get to the root causes of emotional issues. And the idea being there, if we can do that, people won't suffer as much and they won't suffer for as long. And so we do that through 21 wellness tracks that are customized and are broken down into 3 areas: core symptoms, core life domains, and then diverse populations. So I've listed some of the key wellness tracks here, not all of them. They're all on the website. And a person often is in more than one wellness track, or sometimes people are in different wellness tracks at different periods of time. But as I mentioned, we have one on active duty, military, and veterans, all things active duty and veterans, which David will be speaking about more. We have one on altering addictions and becoming balanced, transcending trauma. Obviously, trauma is kind of a key comorbidity or symptom that people often struggle with and from. Reworking relationships, capturing communications, and then 11 other wellness tracks first focused on diverse populations. So with that, I will turn things over to David to speak a little bit more specifically based on his expertise in active duty and veteran mental health.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Beach, and thank you, Cynthia. As undoubtedly many who are watching this now and will be in the future know, you make up those who have served in the military make up a rather small but mighty percentage of the population, 16.5 million people, or only about 6%. And with that, it's easy to be in some ways overlooked, and that is exactly what we don't want to do at OMH. So active duty military personnel and veterans, of course, face an increased risk, mental health and substance abuse issues, which sounds very academic, but is very much meant to, point out the deeply personal issues that everybody is working through. And of course, with the, military roles, this expands on and makes unique the particular struggles that those show up in individually, and often will then involve traumatic and stressful experiences, which I don't have to go into details about. You are far more aware of that than me. Um, and so with that, 6% of men and around 13% of women who serve in the military, for instance, have developed PTSD. 30%, just a few other numbers here, veterans and active duty military personnel experience some form of mental health issue. In fact, in another survey put on by the Wounded Warrior Project, they've noted that upwards of 80% deal with depression, another 70 or so largely deal with anxiety as well. That's from their groups. 50% of veterans who need mental health treatment actually seek it, which is definitely an issue of stigma, and it's something that at least personally, opens up quite a lot in sessions. It's one of the reasons why, OMH, we try to, have as many, it's the diversity, but it's also personalness to it. We want you to feel comfortable showing up, knowing that it's difficult, knowing that there's a history involved that says, be careful about sharing, this might be too much. And it is definitely not a sign of weakness whatsoever. 57%, the suicide rate for veterans was 57.3% higher than the rate for non-veteran adults. Clearly something to continue addressing. And of course, over 50% of military spouses report that their partner's PTSD or related mental health issues cause strain and influence strain on their relationships, which seems obvious, and yet at the same time, again, has a reciprocity effect. So you're dealing with your own issues, then that stems into the couples, and then that brings back, and that's something we address in sessions.
By the way, something I just want to interject here too. I don't think there's a ton of data out yet, but there are studies ongoing for military children because we're heading into April,
Mhm.
which is the military child month of the military child. And there's initial data that's showing that children of active duty service members, right, or reserves or National Guard that have been deployed or mobilized experience more anxiety and depression than a non-military family member, which is really interesting. I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but I think that there probably needs to be a little bit more research done on military families and then military spouses as well. Like for Operation Code, we also serve military spouses and military families, and military spouses consistently are at a rate of 21% unemployment. And that has been unchanged since 2015. So for the last 10 years, it's remained at 21% or higher, and it's gone even up to 38% unemployment as well. So that can tell you like the frequent moving, dealing with depression and anxiety, probably managing the household, managing multiple moves, multiple trips, having to uproot your career, uproot your friends and family. All of that frequent change can lead to mental health needs.
Yeah, thanks very much, David and Cynthia, for that. I mean, to me, the summary from this slide is that these mental health challenges are very common. And that's a point that I think all three of us want to make, is you're not alone. If you're struggling, it's normal to struggle. And importantly, there are effective treatments available that can be helpful. And even though more people are knowledgeable about mental health issues and accessing treatment, as you can see from that middle statistic, there's still around 50% of people who aren't. So there's still a lot of people struggling who aren't accessing care. Care is available, and we want to talk specifically about that today, and really try to normalize things and reduce the stigma, which we know is a huge barrier to accessing care.
Well, in
Okay,
one
Dave.
way of, yeah, no, thank you for that. And that's why we have these individualized wellness tracks. And in point of fact, bringing back Cynthia, thank you for bringing up the anxiety piece in kids. I know that there is a growing number of services that addresses in whole family care.
Mhm.
And it's actually a common question that comes up when I work with veterans. is family issues. It's not that the families are all there, but we will often discuss, like, how do we organize time? How do we transition, from, deployment to being at home? What is the difference between, child care and raising of them, dealing with birthdays and other events while deployed and now at home, and suddenly you're this new person in their life, even though you're still their parent. And how do you navigate, the changes in those relationships? It is common. And by common, I do not mean to be dismissive of it. It is common in the sense of this is normal. This is part of that change that occurs that constantly needs to be addressed. And that's where part of this, the targets for this wellness track that, highlight the particular issues for active duty and veteran wellness, moral injury, something that most recently was, VA has been paying attention to now for the last few years. And there's been some really interesting research into how that works and the particularities of how it relates to PTSD, but is a little different and really has to do with one's philosophy of life and morals and the violation of them that sometimes is felt to have occurred. Combat stress and PTSD, of course, including the accumulation of repeated deployments and repeated issues at home, loss and grief, depression, obviously, suicidal thoughts, as we noted in the previous slide, with percentages there, addiction recovery, dealing with this stuff that is going on and reaching for anything that is perceived as being helpful, and noting that this is something we can address and get into healthier means of, working through the difficulties. Chronic pain from injuries, coping with the transitions, of course, and the moves, not having any, that kind of roots and grounding in one's community, outside of course, the military itself. Transitioning to the civilian job sector, that has a lot of interesting conversations at times. Reintegration with family, of course, and then, not least, supporting those families and the loved ones separated from the service members. How do you maintain communication? How do you navigate what it means to continue to indicate this is somebody who I care about? Those are the issues that we really want to highlight. And we do individually through every single session.
Great. Just emphasize a couple of things here. These are sample targets, not intended to suggest that everyone's going through all of these issues. Most people may be going through one, and there are other issues, of course, people are going. This is just to give an idea. But you can see from those examples, when I mentioned the 21 wellness tracks, some of them were stabilizing symptoms, altering addictions, and becoming balanced, transcending trauma. So you can see from that example how someone might be in more than only the active duty military and veterans wellness track. There are other wellness tracks that overlap. You can see that just from examples on this slide. Okay, a couple more things. We are 100% virtual telehealth service. We're now in approximately 30 states. We have around 130 providers in our pipeline. Started in California and have expanded. Our platform is confidential and secure, so it's not just like a regular Zoom. It's HIPAA compliant, and we take all things confidentiality with what you say and your records very seriously. We have a lot of expert professionals, and that's one of the reasons I invited David here, given his expertise in this area. We have providers who are very experienced in trauma, who do specialized treatments in trauma, for example, and have a lot of experience working with active duty and veterans. As I mentioned, qualities are a big thing. We usually do video sessions. They're usually 60 minutes in length, which is not always the norm in the field. Many places the sessions are 40 minutes. And if you've ever done talk therapy, what you'll find is 40 minutes goes by pretty quickly, especially if you're addressing a number of issues. And then there's a convenience to our virtual platform. So you don't have to be at home to do sessions. People sometimes do sessions in their office at work. We've had people sometimes do them in their car, not while they're driving. And so the ability to access care and the flexibility for your schedule makes it easier to get care if you're busy. And we take most major insurances, which I'll speak to in a moment. So kind of survey says, these are results we're very proud of. This is based on 1,700 respondents to our customer satisfaction survey. And in all areas, we're in the low to mid 90s. So 93% of our clients rated their overall experience at Openmind Health as excellent or very good. 94% stated they had an excellent or very good connection with their provider, which is really getting at that culturally affirming care. And then 92% rated that their understanding of their treatment, their approach, or the theories that are guiding their care is excellent or very good. So we monitor closely and take very seriously and do a lot of continuous quality improvement to ensure that we're able to offer the highest quality treatment. We take most insurances, including ones that will be known to you. So we're connected with the VA, TriWest, which used to be Tricare West, Humana Military, or Tricare East, as well as many of the commercial insurances you can see here, as well as Medicare in many states.
So I have a question while you're bringing up all those different insurance companies. Do you need to have a referral from your primary care provider in order to use your services?
Yeah, so it depends on the carrier. The best way to address that is if someone's interested in treatment, we have a team that's expert in this and they can help guide that process. So there's not always an authorization required. Sometimes there is, and our team will help obtain that or help people know how they can get that. And sometimes if it is required, we can still get an appointment booked, get that authorization, and then have the appointment on the book so that it's reserved. It depends a little bit on the insurance carrier. For example, TriWest has slightly different rules than the Optum CCN, who's the community care network. And sometimes the authorizations come via the VA, but they're dealt with by TriWest or Humana Military. And there's some differences between veterans and active duty, and there are some differences between spouses and family members as well, in terms of what's required.
So in other words, if somebody's interested, they should contact you guys first, and then they can like get some help in navigating.
Exactly.
Instead of going, oh my gosh, I have to go through my provider and they're probably going to turn me down, and VA might not do a referral.
I would start with us and we can tell you what is or isn't needed, so you're not jumping through hoops or going through steps that may not be necessary.
Okay.
And so Openmind Health, based on everything we've discussed, has become a trusted resource, and we are very happy to receive recognition last year as a top 10 telecare innovator by MedHealth Review. And we've also received a number of other awards, which are posted on this screen. Stephanie actually won 2 for the same organization in 2 years in a row.
That's awesome.
That was great. That was great. And also, we're given our providers and their experience and expertise. Basically, if there's kind of a new or innovative treatment, we probably have a provider who offers it. And that level of expertise and innovation has very much been recognized by the media, meaning that the media frequently calls on providers at Openmind Health for their expertise. And on this slide, you can see some of the many places where we've been published. And we have lots of articles that are on our media blogs and articles on our website if you're interested in reading more. Some of those are specific actually to the active duty or veteran community. One other update I wanted to provide is, in addition to the in-person care that we offer virtually, Openmind Health is partnered with a group called NeuroFlow. NeuroFlow is an app that Openmind Health pays for all of its clients that basically helps to provide between session care. So we monitor closely clinical symptoms on scales like the PHQ for depression, the GAD for anxiety, and many others. And NeuroFlow helps us to get those scales out and to monitor progress and make any changes that are required. So both clients and providers can monitor progress. We also have our 21 wellness tracks that I mentioned within NeuroFlow, so people can do work within them. So, for example, let's just say someone was working in the veteran or active duty wellness track. There are YouTube videos related to some of the issues that we've discussed. There's an opportunity to do journaling and many other things. And it has a gamification feature, so you build up points, and that's been a way to increase engagement. The idea here is that 167 hours of the day, people aren't typically in treatment. So this provides a resource for people to use whenever they want, or if they're having a hard day or they want some tips. It can monitor things like steps and mood and many other things. And so far, the feedback from our clients have been very positive. We have a number of partners in the space. Operation Military Family, many of you may know, they support people particularly with employment-related needs. We're partnered with VetLife and also their app that many of you may know called Battle Buddy. I'm sure if people are familiar, but VetLife has an app called Battle Buddy, which is intended for active duty and military as kind of a go-to for all things service related. And Openmind Health has just been added as the go-to, I believe the only go-to for mental health virtually. So we're really excited about that. If you don't have that app, Battle Buddy, it's available on Apple and wherever you get your apps. And then Psych Armor is a group that specializes in training, particularly training for providers around military and veteran issues. They're in the San Diego area. So I just wanted to quickly give you an idea. So the best place to start is with our website, openmindhealth.com. There's a specific military veteran page that highlights everything about our wellness track, publications, our providers, but there's many buttons: start today, book appointment, find a provider. So you basically start there, and then you'll see a screen at the top where you choose your state where you reside, and you'll see kind of a listing there from Alabama to Vermont. The next one is the visit type, and you see there's lots of different visit types, but the one that you'd be selecting is veterans or military initial therapy if it's your first appointment. And also worth saying is about 20 to 25% of our visits right now are veterans and military, just to give you a sense of kind of our experience and expertise in that area. And then after you do that, you'll basically see a number of providers, and on the right-hand side, you'll see their soonest availability. And you can click on each of those. So a lot of people choose based on what they read about the provider and their expertise, as well as the availability. So you can see on that screen when someone's available, and then just click on the time or provider you want. And then you go to this screen, which basically connects you from the website to the EHR. So you put your phone number, they send you a code by text, you put that code, and then basically that initiates the appointment and everything that's required for the appointment. So you get sent some information about Openmind Health, some consent forms around telehealth, and kind of all the usual things that you would do at a healthcare provider to get things off to a good start. So those were the main things that I think we wanted to cover, and then of course to leave time for any questions and discussion.
Thank you guys for being so thorough. I've got questions provided, already
Great.
canned questions, but questions that I have, just for myself, right? For somebody going through it. So how do you know, what if you don't know whether you're supposed to pick a psychotherapist or a social worker or a psychiatrist? Like if you're new to therapy, what's the best way to select a provider for you?
Great. Do you want to, David, take that question?
Yeah. So, much of this depends on what issues you're wanting to address. So if it is medication related, it's going to be more of a psychiatrist. If it is emotional, relational, and, communication skills related, going to be psychotherapy. And then if it's services related to like housing, jobs, clothing, figuring stuff out of basically the day-to-day, living, issues, that's going to be more in social work. So once you've determined, hey, it also doesn't mean though that just because you have one, you can also utilize services in the other. It's more of what the emphasis is going to be.
So
Yeah,
would there be,
many people utilize both. So, for
Mhm,
example, if you were on a medication and you felt like you weren't doing very well and you might need a different medication or a change in a dose of a medication, that would be an example of a reason to see a psychiatrist, since they're the ones that prescribe medications. And we have prescribers who are psychiatrists as well as nurse practitioners and physician assistants who prescribe medications. And then oftentimes people might do an evaluation with a psychiatrist. Psychiatrist follow-up visits tend to be shorter. They tend to be 15 or 20 minutes. So if you're more thinking you're not on meds and you want to more talk about what you're going through and you want to have more time, that would be a therapist typically, because psychiatrists follow-up sessions are 15 or 20 minutes. So typically, we recommend, even for people who are doing meds, that they also do therapy. I think most of our clients who are doing meds are also in therapy. So it's
mhm.
definitely not, as David said, either or. We typically recommend therapy plus or minus the psychiatry. And that can be sometimes informed by the therapy, right? Sometimes your therapist will say, I think in addition to the work you're doing here, if you had, some medication help to take the edge off, or you might be in a better position to optimize the benefits from the therapy. That's not an unusual situation.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. I will tell you, even as a trained provider, I was very resistant to being on medication, which, you'd think that like being in the industry, I wouldn't be, but I really was. And then it took for me to get to the point where I'm like, all right, if you are not really functioning well, you're not sleeping, you are like struggling to the point where you're kind of losing that daily battle, we might want to look at trying a low dose and rent. It wasn't as scary. Like when I actually did it, it wasn't as scary. I went through a couple of different medications that weren't great for me, and mainly just because of the side effects. But I think I want to talk a little bit about medication stigma because I feel like there's people that are like, yeah, meds have been great for me because they have ADHD or they have other, diagnosed disorders that medications work really well for. And then there's the other fact where people are really afraid or maybe they're resistant to being on medication. At any point in time, like if a therapist says, hey, like you might want to talk to one of our psychiatrists and this may help you. If a client says, no, I don't think I'm ready for that, like what happens then? What do the
Right.
therapists do?
Yeah, so overall, most of the people who come to us for therapy. Just to give you a sense, about 90% of the visits we do are for therapy, about 10% are for medication. So there are some people who the stigma is what they don't want to do is talk about what they're going through. And they are happy to medicate it. They'd actually like to numb it with meds or whatever they can. And so they will sometimes prefer to go and see someone where they're not going to go as deep and they can get a medication and hope that that will fix things.
Mhm.
The truth is, medications don't get to those root causes. I mean, they're actually not able to. I mean, they can help and they can address neurochemical imbalances. But kind of when we think of the roots of what's contributing, the biopsychosocial spiritual roots that are contributing to what's going on, the medications are really only able to help the biological part. And most things in people's lives are related to kind of their environment and their families and their relationships and their community and their jobs. So it's usually something like depression is much more complex than, something happened one day, right? It's more of like a pattern of relationships or traumas or triggers. So we always recommend doing therapy. If people won't, sometimes they'll just do medication. But most people who come to us actually, by the time they come to us, and we really encourage people to more proactively, as you said, Cynthia, one of the challenges is if you wait until you're vibrating with anxiety or can't sleep or you're suicidal or you're in a crisis, you're more in crisis management, right? Preferable way, right, is to proactively recognize I'm not feeling like my usual self. I'm feeling
Mhm.
down or I'm more anxious, and say, I don't want to feel this way, and appreciate that there is help, that the help can, really help and get people better, and then do it before things are so bad. That's kind of the ideal. And then
Yeah,
there
so
then there are
prevention.
people, yeah, then there are people who are afraid of meds because they believe that meds are addictive that aren't addictive, or that it makes them seem like they have more of a severe illness, or
Hmm.
that they're, mentally ill for life. So people have lots of reasons why they don't want to access care. They prefer to access therapy versus meds. But all of that is really important to talk about in the therapy. And that's natural for therapists to talk about, like why someone was reluctant or why they waited or why they're ready. And sometimes people do have to kind of hit rock bottom, unfortunately, before they're in a position to, that's not the ideal, but
Hmm.
definitely when you recognize something's going on, it's good to get care. And now that we have virtual care, and we have this specific uh, wellness track that addresses kind of some of these common issues. And we also have availability. That's another thing I wanted to make sure that we oftentimes can get people in, the same day or the next day. So we're not talking about waiting for weeks. Usually people can get in right away.
That's awesome. Um, I want to just finish off the medication piece with a couple of questions that I've seen in our community with people posting about psychotropic medication or microdosing. Do you guys do like microdosing? I know the VA has started, using, I think it's, I don't know if it's MDMA that they're experimenting with prolonged exposure therapy and microdosing with MDMA, or also called ecstasy. Um, I'm always big about, hey, don't just go on the street and just get it or take mushrooms or what, like self-medicate. Do you know anything about like, do you guys do any of that or what do you recommend?
Yeah, so we do. So we actually published an article in Psychology Today about um, psychology therapy assisted psychedelics.
Mm.
It's kind of an overview article. I'd be happy to send you the link to that. We don't prescribe any of the psychedelics, if you want to call them broadly. One that is FDA approved is ketamine,
Mhm.
which of course is known as an anesthetic and has other purposes. What we do is we have many providers who are expert on offering the therapy assisted treatment. So we don't prescribe ketamine, but we partner with groups who prescribe ketamine. And ketamine can come in different forms. It can come in like more of a lozenge form that can get mailed to you and you can take, or it comes in an intranasal form that oftentimes is covered by insurance. And then it comes in an IV form where you go to actually a physical location to get the IV. So we have people who are taking ketamine and who are coming to us for psychotherapy. So yeah, there is good evidence for ketamine, and there is for others. They're just not all approved to be, prescribed in a healthcare setting. So they differ in terms of their regulation and their approval.
Okay.
Um, but I think what you're getting at is the VA is recognizing and people are talking about, the
Hmm.
benefits they've had from those treatments, particularly microdosing. And a lot of times in cases where they may have tried other things and they haven't found those other things to be, adequate.
Yeah, I think also I'll just say from experience is your active duty personnel, and this may be more for David, active duty personnel that are trying to get access to behavioral health. It's been very, very tricky because when you're active duty and you go for an intake, it's all on a record that anybody who works, if they're a combat medic, they can access that record. If it's your chain of command, they can access that record. And so typically there's been a hesitancy for people that are active duty seeking behavioral health care because they're worried about how that record is going to be accessed and if that's going to limit your ability to, one, get promoted, if you're in a combat arms a military occupational specialty, would that prevent you from being deployed? I know in the past, for people that have been diagnosed with active PTSD, they are non-deployable. They actually get a profile that gets flagged, and you're non-deployable at that point. And so when you're non-deployable, you're also flagged for profile, so you can't move up the chain of command. Like you can't get your next rank. So how does Open Mind Health address some of those challenges with people that are active duty service members?
Well, I will say that the vast majority of military that are here as patients are veterans. We have very few active duty, and largely it's just access.
Mhm.
It's and as well the best care. is what is being, of course, always recommended. If you're active duty, you're going to have access to so-called in-house, care that may be more beneficial and knows the particularities of where you're stationed, the ins and outs of what you're working on and what your career path is, so that they know the language more even than I have, and I've been working with it for over a decade. So it's that sometimes there's a recommendation on that. As it comes to like diagnosis and notes, at least personally, you know, notes are about, uh, you know, what do, how do we establish the legitimacy of care? So it's less about any thoughts that we have. We're not in any position to declare whether or not a person, should or shouldn't be, continuing with their service. It has more to do with here are reminders of what is being discussed. Here's what the person is working on. Here's the progress they are making. And personally, I'm always focusing on what that progress is,
Mhm.
so that if anybody asks, it's like, you know, therapy is not a detriment. It should be seen as actually a sign of one's own leadership potential. They're actively engaged in being the best that they can be, and that should be something we applaud. So try to write things down in such a way that are helpful for that. It is an ongoing conversation though, and it's one that don't shy away from with those who have worked with an active, in which it is collaborative. Like, okay, here's what's being said. Of course, every patient has access themselves to everything that is written down,
Yeah.
so they can give feedback. And especially in more sensitive areas, I'll go through, here are the notes that I've done. Like, let's just go through this. Make sure that you're, okay with this. So it meets the criteria of both clinically relevant, but also, personal responsible.
Yeah, the other thing I just thought of, that's great, David. We have what we call transparent documentation. So
Mhm.
it's not unusual that clients will actually read the notes, and we're used to that. So if a
Mhm.
client were concerned about that, they could easily, talk to their provider about that concern. That could shape kind of those notes, and they could even read those notes before there was ever a situation. So we can avoid sending things if possible, right? If there's not like a subpoena or a need to send them, we don't have to send them. Sometimes we'll just send like a summary, a broad summary in a paragraph, as opposed to all the notes to suffice. Like it's not uncommon that if someone wants to know something, they want to know like, what type of treatment are you doing? How long have you been in treatment? Is there a diagnosis? And are there medications? So
Mhm.
that information could be summarized in a paragraph on our letterhead, and we wouldn't have to divulge anything more.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of times the session notes don't go into a lot of detail. They may say discuss family, discuss job, family relations, and stress in this area, and not go into kind of more of the details
Mhm.
uh, as well. So those are some of the protections that
Oh,
we
that's
have in
good
I
to
have,
know.
yeah, I have a legal background. My other master's degree is in forensics, so every time I write, I'm always going, "How would a lawyer take a look at this?" And so it's always with that in mind of just kind of going, if they need clarification, they need to ask.
Right.
This is between me and the patient.
Yeah. And there's
Yeah, you
definitely
might
like
you
the
might, for
patient.
example, have a like an hour session and talk about someone's financial stress and their marriage, and you just might say session discuss financial issues and relationships.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That might be what's in the note.
That's great. And one of the things that I've noticed with veterans too in the traditional VA setting is a high dropout rate. And like, how do you address completion of therapy or encourage people to continue going and, trying to mitigate that high dropout rate that we've seen in the past?
It's the relationship. I mean, it really, it's almost, it's the old Rumsfeld thing. It's the economy, stupid. In therapy, it's the relationship. I mean, it fundamentally is about this. And, I actually got into full-time telehealth a few months before COVID hit. So it was rather serendipitous. And I have not seen any significant drop in therapeutic efficacy
Mm.
in support with telehealth, because one, this is about being open. Some of the benefits of being able to, you know, you don't have to leave your own house. Like you can be in the comfort of your favorite recliner, and having that chat.
Yeah.
It is deeply personal. It is safe. It is non-stigmatized because I mean, not that anybody does the whole lay down on a couch thing anymore, but it is one of those where you are sitting in the comfort of your own place and going, okay, let's just have a chat. So
Mhm.
it is, clinical, of course, still, but friendly. And so, it is the facilitation then of that space of going, everything you share is about your betterment. And, in focusing on here are some clear goals that you have developed. It's not it's not me running your life. It's you running yours and taking ownership of it and developing the things that eventually say, I can move on. I've always been able to stand up on my own 2 feet, just needed some support. And now I can do it even better and check in as needed. So it's
Yeah.
very patient driven with that.
Yeah, so we do talk to people about, for example, the benefits of doing weekly therapy versus monthly, because
Mhm.
therapy works best if you don't do it like you take an ibuprofen for a headache. It is different than that, right? The ability to process things, you can do that better week to week than if you're, only seeing each other month to month, right? That's too much time. But as David said, the biggest thing is the fit between the client and the provider, which is why we're so uh, we prioritize that culturally affirming care. And from the narrative comments it's very common we get reviews saying, I just wish I did this earlier. This has been so helpful. I've only
Yeah.
had 3 sessions, but I've already feel 50% better. So I think the main reason people don't come back or don't do more sessions if they're not finding it as helpful, or they're, they thought it would be quicker than it is. So sometimes we have to tell people, Rome wasn't built in a day. One therapy session, isn't going to get at your entire life. So we help to kind of set that frame. Like, for example, it's not unusual to do 8 or 10 therapy sessions weekly. That would be kind of pretty typical for anxiety or depression. Many people do more than that. So if someone came in and they thought they were just going to, have one session, that's not usually how therapy works.
Mhm. Yeah, that's the get to know you session.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, talk about yourself and figure out what's going on and come up with what the goals might be. And the actual doing the work and getting to anything is in the sessions beyond that.
Mhm. Do you guys have any questions for me? I think this has been super helpful.
I don't think I have any questions. The one thing I probably didn't say is I did say going to our website's good. Some people prefer to talk to someone. We have a team specifically devoted to active duty and veterans. So you can reach them at veterans with an S at openmindhealth.com. So that's
Okay.
either for active duty or veterans. And then we have the old fashioned phone that people call all the time. And our number is 1-855-550-6463. So if people don't want to go to the website and book there, or they have additional questions or concerns, we can help in those ways as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for letting us know what you do. I'm sure we'll have some follow-up sessions maybe and really talk about like maybe some partnerships. What would that look like? But thank you so much for joining and I appreciate you all.
Great. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for
Thank
this opportunity.
you. Absolutely.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Yeah, you
You
too.
too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.